Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is the Upper Tier Podcast. I am your host, Niall. If you could do me one big favour and go out there, smash that subscribe and bell notification button, and of course, drop a like in the video. Tonight, I'm joined by two, I would say, OGs, of the Upper Tier chat, no less. Joining me tonight for I would say, a conversational piece that could get heated about one Stephen Kenny. It certainly got heated on last Thursday's show. I don't even know how I ended up with Kyle talking about Stephen Kenny, but the minute we started talking about him, the chat just lit up with you two guys. So joining me from Cheapy Productions podcast, of course, Maurice, how are you, my friend?
Great, great. Nice to see you, gentlemen.
Good, good. And also joining us from Retrotainment, Ted. How are we, Ted?
Well, not too bad. This is a debate that's gone on, as you said in your chat last week, but also in the WhatsApp group as well at times about whether Stephen Kenny should be in or out. So it'll be interesting to kind of be able to have an actual conversation. It's very difficult to have it when you're just typing back and forth at each other.
Yeah, and especially in the chat, our chat can get quite heated at times about stuff. Maurice, before we get into Stephen Kenny, congrats today, 170 million. Arsenal not messing around.
Oh, for Declan Rice
and Kai Havertz,
the old Irishman himself. Oh, Kai
That's
Havertz.
it.
Yeah, I'm absolutely over the moon with the Kai Havertz one. Yeah, can't wait for that.
Serious intent by the club, though. 170 million in a day. Boom. No messing about. And Timber due to come in as well, I heard, by Friday as well. Certainly making the right moves.
He looks like a decent player, actually, but I'm very on the fence with Kai Havertz. I'd be worried about your club, Ted, as well, with the Mason Mount deal.
I'm not. Well, it's looking like we're going for Caicedo now because Chelsea have tried to hold off for a bit too much on old Mason Mount. So hopefully we don't bend over backwards to get him. But
it's becoming a crazy transfer window, lads. Obviously the contracts all run out. I think on Friday is the 30th, is it, if I'm right? Yeah, Friday the 30th is when the contracts run out. And from the 1st of July, that's when the absolute doors open wide and away we go. And let's see what happens. Could be a mad one. Right, let's get into this one. We'll take a few comments first. Jaminho is in. How are you, my friend? Good to see you in the chat. Stephen Kenny is the worst manager in our history, even worse than the Steve Staunton regime. And also, losing at home to Luxembourg was a sackable offence. Don't think there's too many of us would disagree with that, but we shall see. Eno's in the house. What's the crack, Niall? All good. Lads, what's happening? He wants to know what's happening. And Acers is in. Signing for the FAI should be a criminal offence in itself. Yeah, I believe so. Every Rice jersey sold, you have a choice of a free pack of rice cakes or a bag of rice or ambrosia rice pudding.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. But will the jersey be the right jersey though? We'll have 32 games or 38 games. That's more the question. And also,
will it be an England jersey or an Ireland jersey?
It certainly will not be an Ireland jersey by the looks of things. The amount of lads, it's mad to think, isn't it? You look at himself and Grealish, there you have 200 million quids, over 200 million quids worth of players that could have declared for Ireland and then got away on us. But is it worth it, all that money spent? It is if you're Declan Rice. That's all I'll say on that.
Before we get to the Stephen Kenny bit, right? As you said, both Grealish and Rice fucked off from Ireland, right? After being told they weren't good enough to play for England at the underage levels, and we took them in. Which one do you find worse? If you know what I mean. Like, I think Grealish going wasn't as bad because he'd always been quite open about the fact that he was an English boy and that he wanted to play for England. Whereas Rice was out here proclaiming his love for Ireland and all of this shite until he got the fucking call up. I think he's a way bigger rat.
Yeah, and he did tweet up the Ra as well.
He did.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think it's I think about those boys' situations. I think a lot of the blame lands with ourselves, really, isn't it? And that's why the uproar.
Oh, it does definitely.
As how you'd feel and stuff like that. I just don't know. I suppose shout out today as well. Did I read Ogbenny as well as signed for Luton?
Yeah,
That's a great move for that lad, and that will only help us. The more players we have actually plying their trade in the Premier League is what will make us better and improve us, rather than kind of what we're dealing with at the moment. But we'll get into that and we'll talk about it. Andrew's in. How are you doing, Andy, my friend? Andy does a bit of business with me in the shop and stuff like that. Drops in. Huge Randy Orton fan, as you can tell. RKO. How are you, my friend? Good to see you in there. I hope you're enjoying the shows. Right, let's get into this. Where are we going to start? Ted, we'll let you start because you're kind of, I suppose, a bit more somber on this topic, I would say. Let us know your thoughts on this. We'll have a look, I suppose, at the squads that he started with and where he is now, kind of, and we'll discuss that. We'll have a look at his managerial record. And there's a few other things. Obviously, we'll have a look. I mean, Maurice, we know what side you're on. We've seen it and stuff like that. So I suppose from your point of view, we'll talk about it where you're at, and it's fairly self-evident. You know, the evidence is there to support the decision. But I suppose the decision is, if you make that decision, what then? And what you're thinking on that kind of thing as well, you know. So Ted, kick us off there. Let us know your thoughts.
Yeah, so I know Maurice is a staunch Kenny out. I'm not staunch on Kenny in, right? It's not necessarily that I think that Kenny has to stay. I'm not a huge advocate of his. My thing is more, if you kick Stephen Kenny out, who are you bringing in? Because he's on 500,000 a year, which seems like big money to us, but that is not big money for an international manager. And the truth is, who are you going to get in? Because there's not going to be many managers that will take up the position. And any that do aren't going to be much better than him. And I think, although his record hasn't been great, he has had to come in and he's decided he's going to change the culture of Irish football at an international level. Whereas for years, all we've done is get the ball and boot it long, hope that a forward will knock it down, give it back to a midfielder, and then we can build from there. Whereas what he said is, forget about all of that. You need to learn to hold onto the ball and move it up the pitch because, as the old saying goes, if you have possession of the ball, you can't concede. Do you know what I mean? So he's trying to get rid of that where we're just booting the ball away and just hoping for the best that we'll get somebody to knock it down. The last time I can remember us not just booting the ball up straight to the top is when Roy Keane played for us. And that was more to do with Roy Keane in the middle of the park than it was anything else. Because if you boot with that ball by Roy Keane the whole game, you'd got knocked the fuck out in the dressing room. He demanded that ball, and since he stopped, that's all our tactics ever been: boot it long, hope for the best. So Stephen Kenny had to try and change that entirely, and then his squad was one of the weaker squads that he took over. He had a very weak squad when he did take over. So his record is quite poor, but it has been improving as he's been there, and we've seen ourselves playing better football as we go along. So I don't see, if you kick him out, what do we go back to route one, boot it long, and who's going to take us there? Because we're just going to go back to doing the same thing. And that was not working for us really at all. Like, you know.
Yeah, I suppose where I'm coming from, I suppose before we start with Maurice, I think Maurice has been Kenny out from day one. Maurice, you never thought he was the guy to go into that seat. I remember you messaging me, even I think during COVID and all sorts of stuff, saying this is not the guy for the job, which is fair enough. Ted, on your points there, I suppose the one thing I would say is the sign of a good manager, although he's trying to change things culturally and stuff like that, is a good manager will also recognize, obviously, that it's a results-driven business, and I know Maurice will definitely get into that. But also, I think you have to really look at the tools and the players and the strengths that you have available to you, and you have to ask yourself, are those players of the quality to be able to deliver where you're trying to go, or should you stage it a little bit more? Because I think he tried to go from long ball to Brazilian, you know, and very, very quickly and clearly, and this is kind of to his credit a little bit. I think he was dumped into a meat grinder. I think the backdrop of all the shit that was going on in the FAI, I think if the FAI hadn't had any financial problems and the issues that they faced from the previous regime, let's say, without dropping any names, we know what it is. Books have been written about it and everything. I don't think this guy would have got the job. I truly believe if the money was there to bring in a better quality manager, although this manager we have at the moment actually thinks, based on his last outburst, that he's the cream of the crop by the sounds of things. And we'll get into that as well. We're going to quote that and talk about it as well. But I think when I look at it, I kind of think of, I was reflecting on it last week after the show on Thursday, and I was kind of thinking that kind of stubbornness at times is a real problem. And we seen it as a Liverpool fan last year. I seen it with Klopp as well, where he didn't have the tools or the quality there or the legs or whatever to play the 4-4-3-3 high press, but he persisted with it to the point of losing games and costing us games and points. And I see a lot of that in Kenny as well, where he's decided that he wants to nearly leave a cultural mark on Irish football by getting us to play football and stuff like that. But I suppose for me, I look at that squad and I don't see the quality in it to be able to do that. I see little bits of it, but overall, I don't see it. Maurice, give us your opening kind of thoughts and where you're coming from.
Well, style of play, like, he can be given credit for trying to change things, but I feel that we don't have the players to play that kind of football all the time, maybe. And I think if you just look at the history of the way Ireland have played and what's gotten us to major tournaments, kind of touched on it there, it's playing to our strengths. You know, in one breath, the Stephen Kenny fans will say we want to play expansive football. In the second breath, they'll say when they lose a game that we don't have the players. So where's the balance in that? It's either we have the players or we don't have the players to play the style of football. When it comes to money, €550,000 a year is a lot of money to some people. And I give you an example. That's the type of money. He's on the exact same wages as Steve Clark in Scotland, who's doing a fantastic job with them. And he's obviously well experienced in club football as well. So I think there is people out there that can take the job. It's kind of, the easy answer is nobody wants the job. Who doesn't want to get paid €550,000 minimum a year to manage maybe 10 games? You know, someone that could be on the far side of where Kenny is, somebody like Steve Clark that's kind of maybe coming towards the end of their career and wants kind of a handy number kind of to ride into the sunset. So I think, like, to say that there's no one that would take the job, I think is wrong, because I think we could find someone, and we could obviously find someone better than a manager with a 20% win ratio in competitive games. That's my thoughts on it.
We'll definitely go down through the list, because I have the list here. There last week or whatever it was, they released the list of potential candidates and the pricing in the bookies and all that kind of stuff. So we'll go down through that, lads, and you can kind of tell me, who do you see would slot in, or who do you think would do a better job, and would they suit it, and would they come in for 500 grand a year? You know, like, it is really, really good money. I mean, to us three guys, it's phenomenal money and stuff like that. I mean, us three guys that nearly manage the Ireland team for free, and they don't get paid to do it, you know. I think, Maurice, your comparison to Scotland is an interesting one, because that one gives me a bit of a throwback to Ireland under Charlton, where he had a lot of players that were playing in the Premier League that he uncovered and he unearthed and brought in and stuff like that. And if you look at that Scottish team as well, there's some really good footballers in that Scottish team, and a lot of them playing their trade in the Premier League, you know. So it's kind of, when you compare that to the Irish team, I mean, there's a hell of a lot less. And if you look at a lot of the Ireland team and the Ireland squad, and I have both of them there, I think his first ever named squad to his last squad, and it's a difficult comparison to do as well, because obviously Coleman is out injured. If he was fit, he'd play. I think Hourahan was out as well. There was about 3 players, I think, maybe 4, that weren't available for the last round of matches, that generally would be in around the squad. And I think that's probably why we've seen the likes of maybe Smallbone come in and players like that and stuff like that. So, but when you look at that squad, I looked at it and I seen there's still around 13 to 14 players from his first squad to his last squad. And on top of that as well, they're saying he's blooded about 18 players. So there's kind of like, let me know, Ted, let me know your thoughts on this. Like, there's still 13 players there from the squad that he inherited, or his first name squad, if you like. You know, the likes of McLean is still there, Jeff Hendrick is still there, Doherty is still hanging around. I mean, where there's been a real revolution really is mainly in the goalkeeping area, where he's only retained Travers. Bazunu came in under his watch, and obviously Cuivine came in under his watch. And obviously, probably our strongest situation in the Irish team is probably our goalkeeping situation, to be honest, where we have a bit of competition and we have a bit of quality, that generally, you know, is in around Premier League teams and playing a little bit of football as well. Obviously, Bazunu played a lot of football last year for Southampton and stuff like that. Let us know your thoughts kind of on the squad situation and stuff like that, and this blooding of all these new players.
Yeah, like as you said, keeper wise, we're blessed, and I think as a country we've always been quite blessed with our goalkeepers. I can't remember a time where I would ever have said the worst player on the pitch for us has been our goalkeeper. Do you know what I mean? More often than not, our goalkeeper is our saving grace in every game. Like, and that's as far back as I can remember. Maybe before I was born, maybe goalkeepers weren't as strong, but I think they've always been a strong position for us. Defensively, we've usually been fairly okay. You know, at least a couple of our defenders are usually playing at a Premier League level, which seems to be always good. Now, you mentioned Coleman. I don't think Coleman would be starting for us too much anymore now. I think his days at the top are kind of numbered, and Doherty is probably going to secure that spot now for the next little while until somebody better comes along, because he is playing. He's not in the Premier League, obviously. He's moved off to Spain, hasn't he? So he's playing in the top divisions in Spain. We have Collins, and then Dara O'Shea, who's just signed for a Premier League club as well there. So it's good to see a couple of our players now stepping up and playing in the Premier League, which is one of the biggest issues. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the Premier League, but if these players are only playing in the third and fourth divisions of leagues, it really does speak a lot about the quality of what we have,
and whether they're even playing, because some of them don't even play even at that level. So
yeah. So we've got James McLean, who I've never rated. I've always loved his passion for the country and things like that, but as a player, I've never thought him all that great, and I don't know how he's continued to get into the squad now. Especially the last few years, where he's lost whatever pace he did have to the point that they've had to drop him to a left back, and he can't fucking defend either. So I don't know how he's still in there, but it's looking bright with the players that are coming in. We've got two good strikers, and then Troy Parrott is kind of there as well, who people thought was going to be quite good, but hasn't really done what people were expecting. And the midfield is looking a little bit stronger now than it did a couple of years ago. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily down to Kenny. These players are off plying their trade elsewhere, and he's only had them for 34 games, but he's trying to change the culture of a nation with these games that are they're very sparse and very, there's not as many of them as there used to be. Like, friendlies are kind of a thing of the past, which is where if you wanted to try something new is normally where you try it. He hasn't really had the chance to do that. So anything he's wanted to change has had to be in competitive games. So I do see our squad starting to improve now the last few years, which will only be better for us. But when he first came in, that squad it wasn't where it needed to be. Like, our top goal scorer before he came in was a defender, as far as I can remember. It was Duff at the back, wasn't it? Duffy at the back, wasn't it? Scored 3 goals or something in the year. He was our top goal scorer. Do you know what I mean?
And then he came in, Ted, now that you mentioned that, when you mentioned Duffy, Kenny came in and then dropped Duffy for his first game, which I thought was interesting as well.
Yeah, and Duffy had gone off to Celtic and hadn't had a good run of it. So I can see why maybe he thought, maybe I'll give some of the younger lads a bit of a chance here. But the fact that before Kenny came in, our top goal scorer was our centre back, that screams as to where we were really lacking was a goal scorer. Yeah. Like, years gone by, we had the Robbie Keanes and things.
Ted, sorry to interrupt you, but he came in that playoff game that Mick McCarthy got us to, that one-off game.
Yeah, and he lost on penalties.
And he dropped his, we'll say, top scorer, best player maybe of the tournament, in Shane Duffy. Now, he was put in a bad situation there, but I feel that, he shouldn't have made so many changes going into that very important game. But I don't blame Kenny for losing that game on penalties either. Mick should have been given that game for getting Ireland all the way there, and that was a terrible first game to give him. So I give him a free pass on that one.
But I mean, losing on penalties,
he was dropped into the melting pot, wasn't he? Really.
But also, when you lose on penalties, I know you should win the game in the 90 minutes, but at the same point, losing on penalties isn't.
It's a lottery.
Yeah, it is a lottery. Like, yes, he dropped Shane Duffy, but it didn't cost us the game. Do you know what I mean? The fact that we didn't score our penalties cost us the game.
Well, I suppose being dropped, and if he had played, you'll never really know. It's very hard to tell. Would we have been a better unit with him at the back? He would have been more of a bigger kind of leader there at the back as well and stuff like that. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, lads, when he came back from Celtic and he went back to Brighton, he was doing good things at Brighton again. He was in the Brighton side and stuff like that. So that is, there's no doubting on his quality at the time and stuff like that. Acer's in. Unfortunately, League of Ireland players will not be able to play to international standards. That statement there, lads, really sums up what's gone on in the FAI, doesn't it? When you think about grassroots and developing all that kind of stuff, and that money that was all paid off and useless absolute crap that came out and didn't develop at a grassroots level, So thanks for that comment, Acers. Yeah, but that really sums it up. I wanted to get on. Sean is in. How are you, Sean? Good to see you, man. Roy Keane would get a good reaction. He would only be part-time, so we'll get big performances. About 6 a year is enough to get qualified for a tournament. I don't know whether I agree with that. I think you have to be a certain ilk of player to react in a way that's Roy Keane's management style, I'd say. And I don't know whether that style transcends into 2023. That's all I'll say. Love Roy Keane. I think he's actually gold as a pundit and stuff like that. Actually, don't want to lose him as a pundit because I think all that stuff is way better than if he was managing Ireland. And in fairness, he had a crack at it with O'Neill as well and stuff like that. And I just think Roy Keane and the FAI is just it's not a marriage we want to get into either. No. But great show. Mark is in. Evening, lads. There's some League of Ireland players out there better than we have in the squad. And don't forget, a lot of the squad are championship players. I think Jack Byrne could definitely do a job. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a fair point. I firmly believe that as well. When you look at how we play and stuff like that, I've often made commentary on that. And I think that the thing about, if you look at some of the League of Ireland players as well, where they might lack a little bit of standard that you need there, but they're playing week in, week out. Whereas a lot of these players were even pulling from the championship. Some of them just aren't simply playing. You know what I mean? And yet they're still picked and around the squad. Ian's in. Jack Byrne, great shout, Mark. Absolutely. He was in and around the squad, wasn't he? Didn't he give him a game or two or something like that? And then he went off. Did Jack go off to do
I think Mick gave him a few games.
Yeah, didn't he go off somewhere? Yeah, he went off to Cyprus and that didn't work out too well, I think, or something like that. Sure, didn't it? He got injured.
Mick got the bullet out there.
Didn't he get injured?
Yeah.
Didn't he go out there and he did a knee or an ACL or something like that, or something happened? I think. Doherty only played 14 minutes in La Liga and got released. Yeah, he's that's such a strange one. But again, actually, if you look at the two squads, it's interesting to see how he's kind of played a little game in there as well. When you look at the way he's moved McLean around and moved Doherty around and stuff like that to accommodate some of these players that would be Stephen Kenny fanboys, let's say, for lack of a better word. Northern Ireland got to a top tournament without all their players playing the Premier League. Yeah, now, Ian, the idea of the Premier League, that comment that I made was mainly related to Scotland when we were comparing, when Maurice was comparing Stevie Clark in Scotland and the job he's doing. They have a lot of players in the Premier League playing in the Premier League week in, week out, like some McGinn and all, Andy Robinson at Liverpool and stuff like that. These guys are playing high level week in, week out. It wasn't necessarily that we should just have Premier League players and stuff like that. Northern Ireland have actually done. Yeah, go on.
The comparison, I made with Steve Clark was, I was just mentioning that he was on the same money.
Yeah,
the money. That was my point with that. And he's doing a great job, in fairness to him as well, on top of that.
Yeah, but I think part of the reason he's doing a great job is he's a great pool of players. He's like Scotland are in a very good place at the moment. I think they're top of their table at the moment, aren't they? Haven't they got a maximum points? They haven't dropped a point yet and stuff like that. Yeah. No. So you can see the quality of the players that he has in there. That's a huge factor as well, you know. Whether Steve Clark could get that same factor out of this group of Irish players, well, I think would be more debatable. But again, from a financial point of view, yeah, you're spot on. Sean's also in as well. Northern Ireland had a lot of players in the Premier League. Yeah, absolutely. And they also they've invested a lot of money as well in the league up there as well, and in the grassroots situation in Northern Ireland. So good to see it. Mark is in. How the hell is Hendrick still getting in the squad? I think that's a question none of us can answer here, really, but all of us still put this question in, you know.
Yeah.
And Ian's comment is brilliant. Hendrick is the new Whelan. He's quite, I don't know. He sort of like, he didn't throw him in for these two games much. Sure, he didn't. He sort of brought him in kind of thing. So you can see he is fizzling out a little bit, but this rootlessness that he talks about and this cultural change and stuff like that, in certain aspects of it, it's very slow and stuff to bring in and stuff like that, you know. But yeah, look, don't get me started on Glenn Whelan. Seriously, like if I get into a midfield discussion about the Ireland team, I'll go absolutely ballistic because I'll start talking about the absolutely tragedy that's Wes Houlihan. Though, like we did just ridiculous, big time, you know. Duffy played well with the Celts. I think he had a tough time up there, you know. To be honest, I think
I don't think he had 1 or 2 good games, but overall it wasn't what people were expecting from him.
I don't think he enjoyed the move himself anyway. I just don't think he ever settled. Mark, no point having Ferguson up front if we don't have a midfielder that can put his foot on the ball and actually play. Need a Wezzo type player in there. There you go. Just mentioned it there now. It's a spot on. Didn't even see a comment at that stage. Sean Patrick, Andrew Moran, and Eno's in. They've been saying that for years about the League of Ireland. Yeah, but they've just never, ever really invested in it and stuff like that. The only thing that's kind of changing now, I suppose, lads, is it's way more difficult now with the new rules for Irish lads to go over to the UK and stuff like that, deploy their trade through the academies and stuff like that. Because with all this whole European situation and all now that has changed, we're kind of
it is and it isn't though. Because honestly, if you think about it back to when you were younger and you were playing ball at a youth level, how many people did you know that were good footballers? Like that you thought to yourself, like these lads are good, these could go on. But they weren't picked up by anybody before they were 16, 17, 18. And that's one of the major issues. And I know this isn't to do with the Ireland squad itself. This is a way deeper issue. And this is to do with the fact that certain people lined their pockets rather than investing when we had the money, invested the money into the grassroots. But and I don't mean this as a slight or anything now, because I know you coach a youth level team, but youth level teams are coached by somebody's dad all the way up. And when you're under sixes, under sevens, it's somebody's dad, and there's the ball, we'll do a few laps of the pitch and then we'll just play a game and we'll see who gets to play on the weekend from there. And that's the way it goes for a lot of the time. You don't get coached on any of this. Look over the back of your shoulder, make sure there's no one there. There's no one practicing finishing with you and stuff like that.
You actually believe it or not, Ted, you do now. Actually, a lot of the clubs have invested in.
But now they're starting to do it. But over
the last 3 to 4 years and stuff. Yeah,
this should have been done back in the early 2000s when we had the money. Like we should have invested all of this money.
Well, see, the problem with back then, Ted, is if you came across a player of a certain quality and stuff like that, straight away your thoughts was to get him off to the UK into one of the academies. But now there's a whole different cost structure there in terms of doing that, and the academies have to carry a level of cost way greater than it was before. Nearly the equivalent of actually signing a player now. That's how the rules have changed.
But if we'd invested money into the Irish League, you could have your Bray Wanderers, your Pats, your Cove Ramblers, all of these teams. You could have all of them with youth teams where they're picking up these younger players and they're getting trained by people with a bit more experience at a higher standard than any of us have played at. Do you know what I mean? Like we didn't invest that money, and so these things have happened. So where other countries like France, Spain, England, they've progressed massively and they consistently produce good players. We don't, because what used to be good enough to get you over to the academies isn't good enough anymore because they're picking up players at 5 and 6 years old, whereas we're not looking at players until they're 16 or 17. And most of them have fucked off and started drinking and smoking and going out for the night out at that stage. Like that's a major problem in this country. It's not necessarily a problem with the international team we have now, but it is a problem that has to be addressed as to why we've stagnated for so many years.
Well, it's very simple. I mean, if you think about the organisation that basically runs it, that's ultimately where a lot of this lies and stuff like that. Because a lot of these guys, you look at a lot of the clubs even in the League of Ireland now. A lot of them aren't even pro. Some of them are semi-pro.
I don't think any of them are pro at the moment. I don't think any of them can fully play their players.
I think it's only Rovers, is it? I think Rovers might be the only one. I'm not too sure.
I think Rovers, and then somebody tried it a couple of years ago and it bankrupted them, and somebody tried them a few years before that and it bankrupted them as well. Because there just wasn't enough money coming in from ticket sales and things, because
Yeah,
why
you're
would you
spot
not
on
want
there,
to?
Mark. Mark's saying he got a bad injury a few games in over in Cyprus. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I remember that. Yeah, he got an injury and didn't work out for him. Daz is in. Evening, Niall and panel. How are you, Daz? Good to see you there, man. Mark, he has been linked with a move to America. Yeah, interesting. And that's the kind of thing, isn't it? Kind of when you take a move like that,
It's a risk.
not only is it a risk, but you're kind of, if you're out of sight, out of mind kind of thing, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because I don't know how much scouting we're doing these days and stuff like that. When you look at, I mean, obviously, you know, we've brought in, you know, Obafemi and Ogbeni and a few of these players and stuff like that look real good prospects and stuff like that. But I wonder how much scouting we are actually doing and stuff like that, especially over in the UK and stuff like that. And again, actually in the Irish League itself as well, you know. Ian, FAI is the problem essentially with their investment in grassroots. Yeah, 100%.
Oh yeah.
The fella in the green and white shirt, yeah, that lad on the list. And don't forget the other factor, lads, and that's English lads coming over to play underage international football, taking the place of homegrown lads, and then declaring for England. Yeah, 100%, 100%. But that's look, it's a money move. I've said it before. If Grealish was an Irish international and Rice was an Irish international, their fee would be half what people have paid for them. So it's you know they're being advised, you know, and you know, would you deny that advice if it was your kid? Would you not be nearly advising them the same thing, really, when you look at the money that's being thrown at it, you know? So it's a difficult one as well. There needs to be a better pathway for coaches also, but funding needs to come from the FAI. Yeah, absolutely. Been down that road, personally. And it's not just the two snakes; it's the likes of Phil Neville soon and all. Martin O'Neill could have sealed the deal for Grealish and Rice being Ireland players too. No.
Yeah, he could have put them on into an international game, and yeah, we would have. Yeah. That would have been them stuck. Like,
Rovers are full time. Yeah, that's what I was saying, Mark. Rovers are full time. Yeah, absolutely. I think they're the only one in the league as well, and it kind of shows, doesn't it? 9 times out of 10, anyway. So Maurice, give me your thoughts on who you would want in there, and I'll get yours as well, Teds, if you feel that he's not the guy. I mean, obviously, the results kind of speak for themselves, you know. I mean, a lot of the results there are kind of. I know he's dropped the ball on certain teams. Like you look at France, you know. I had a little bit of hope again after that French game. We lost 1-0, but I thought we gave a great account for ourselves. And then, of course, you know, it falls asunder then with Greece again, you know. The Norway result 2-1. Again, Norway, I think, are a very, very good team and stuff like that. So, where I suppose the disappointment is when you look at the results, it's kind of this style of play that he's kind of trying to play. And it kind of just breaks down because we just don't have the quality. Maurice, give us, before we get into talking about who we'd like to see in there or who we think could go in there and do a job, give me a rundown on the results, your thoughts on it, not necessarily individually and stuff like that, but just, you know, there's been some disappointing results in there, and not only that, even in some of the draws, there's been some disappointing performances.
Yeah, I'll give you the list of results that I noted from his time that were poor. 1-0 loss at home to Ukraine, 1-0 loss away to Armenia, 1-1 draw at home to Azerbaijan, 1-1 draw away at Qatar, 1-0 loss to Luxembourg at home, and a 1-0 loss home and away to Finland. They're the kind of ones that I looked at. And then you look at his two best performances, probably the away loss in Portugal, where we played really, really well that night. And of course, the home win over Scotland as well, the 3-0. That was a very good performance. But I think the bad outweighs the good. And like, I'm just not going to change my mind on it at all. And the guy gets a free pass from the media. He gets a free pass from like nearly 90% of the journalists out there. Spun it last week when we poor performance in Greece, and then we bet Gibraltar. Fair enough, anyone was going to beat Gibraltar. And then the stories come out on, I think it was Tuesday morning, that Kenny gave this real passionate speech in front of everyone that wasn't recorded, by the way. And then that was all pushed out into the media the next day. Like, I just don't know. He's the most protected man in Ireland. And why? Why is he so protected, lads?
Well, I think it is turning a little bit, isn't it? You've seen commentary coming out from Delaney. You've seen commentary coming out from Brian Kerr. and stuff like that. And of course, these are kind of, you know, some of the stuff that comes out from these guys as well can be a bit bewildering at times as well.
This is a part. It's like the wrestling, Niall. It's a work. It's TV.
Maybe Ted, I didn't pick the two best examples, to be honest, because they've spun out their own sayings and stuff like that. Well, I give you a little brief synopsis of what was said in the press conference afterwards, the embargo section.
Oh,
right?
I'll give you
Ted. I'll give you a little rundown of this. I don't know, Ted. Have you seen this? Have you read it? No.
I read it a while ago, but yeah, refresh my memory there.
Okay, he says. This is where he got fired up now, you know what I mean? And I was wondering how he had all this on the head ready to go and stuff, that he obviously knew they were coming in hard for himself, you know? He says, I have been in 16 cup finals. I was in 8 FAI Cup finals. I have been in 2 Scottish Cup finals. I won 6 League Cups. I won more trophies than anyone in modern history. I presume he's talking Irish history here now. He's not talking...
I would assume so, yes.
Yeah, I would just assume so. I won 5 league titles, 46 Champions League and Europa League games. I beat, now, how tie yourselves down here. This is who we beat. I beat Maccabi Tel Aviv, Badi Borisov, Gothenburg home and away, Hajduk Split, and others. Drew with Paris Saint-Germain and drew with Legia Warsaw. Quite the list. That's why I got the job. Because I am the most successful Irish man at this time.
That's fuck all to do with what he's doing now, though.
I'm not finished. This gets good. Yeah. Don't worry. I went on from that, managed the under-21 team, got good experience, took the radical approach of taking all these 17-year-olds and putting them in the under-21 team, which never happened before. We had an exciting time and we're leading the group and might have qualified. He says, he talks then obviously about Mick McCarthy and COVID and how he was he didn't say he was dropped in the melting pot, but you know where he was coming from. He goes, Maurice will obviously debate this, of course. He goes, realistically, I have been 2 years building this team. I think he's leaving out a year there, but I'm just saying. Since March, when we lost here against Luxembourg and in the opening game in Serbia. So he's talking about all of those players have come in over the last 2 years. We've given 18 players their debut, 18 players their debut through our own system. We had 9 years with nothing through. Nothing we brought 18 players through from the system. So I think mainly he's kind of saying a little bit of what we agree when you go through the Trapattoni and the Martin O'Neill and the Stevie Staunton and all these other errors and cons, stuff like that. It was very tough, let's say. There wasn't very many new fresh faces tended to come through. We finished third in the group, which was probably parity. Obviously, there was a bit of pain, a bad defeat against Luxembourg and so forth. It's a lot more than that. This is the campaign that I've built for. So listen to that now. Obviously, we had a right setback with the game against Greece. That was an important part of the plan to beat Greece, to try to do that because we got sort of a group of death. The group of death.
Yeah, it wasn't a group of death before that.
Yeah.
It's a group of death now.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think I'm very strong and very resilient, and I don't really care. I don't need to listen to anyone's opinions to know what I want and what I am. Now, this is what concerns me, because he doesn't listen to criticism at all. I felt that all last season with my own club. Don't worry about that. I've taken on a lot, and it's small community in Ireland, and people are upset over a variety of things, but all of the decisions I made with the international team were with the best interests of Irish football. Probably hard to argue with that, I'd say. I've made brave decisions in the best interests of Irish football, okay, and I've made good decisions. I have a brilliant backroom staff. Keith Andrews is an outstanding coach, absolutely, who was in the betting to take your job, by the way, if you're getting the bullet. Outstanding. John O'Shea has been a brilliant addition, absolutely. Dean Kiley. These are top-level people. Stephen Rice has graduated and doing a great job on all of the backroom team. So on the face of it, I mean, is John O'Shea in there and stuff like that. He's a lot of experience and stuff. So we will get better. We want to still qualify from this group. Forget about it. I'll see out until the end of the campaign. I don't know after that. It's other people's decisions. The objective was to qualify from this campaign. That is the objective. I'm not trying to hide from that. I'm not trying to build forever. We've been building a team over the past 2 years to try and qualify here. That's his reaction to the commentary I was telling you about, where I think it was Damien Delaney, is it, turned around and said, when are we going to get over this whole COVID thing and move on and start actually producing something? And I know Brian Kerr came in and said as well that previous Ireland managers would have been sacked for less kind of thing and all this kind of thing. So what you're thinking, lads, on kind of obviously he's reading what's being put out there. He can feel what's coming through from the fans and the press, and he knows that there's this kind of tidal wave coming. So he's preempting a lot of it in what he said there. Now, listen, there's no denying, his managerial record and stuff like that and what he has achieved. I can pop it up there. I don't know whether you'll be able to see it, but he has quite decent win percentages in most of the places he went to and most of the places, where he has applied his trade, let's say, and stuff like that, if you like. Then the major drop off, obviously, is the Republic of Ireland. That's where it drops right down, way under the 30%. Everything else is
too big a job.
Too big a job, and I don't think just the job. I think too big a task in terms of what he was tasked to do, in terms of what he was left with and how he was kind of parachuted in, and then it's What you're thinking on what he said there? Give us an idea what your thinking was on it. Maurice, you can, or Ted, whoever
Maurice,
wants.
do you want to go first, or do you want me to go?
You go ahead, Ted. You can have this one.
I get where he's coming from with the idea of he doesn't want. He's where he says he's not taking the criticism, right? That can be taken in one or two ways. One, he's not listening to the criticism at all, and he's just going to plow ahead, which I don't think is the case, because if that was the case, he wouldn't even be reading the criticism. You wouldn't know the criticism that was being leveled at you if you weren't going out and looking for it. Do you know what I mean? So he is taking it on board. What he's actually doing is saying, I am hearing it, but I'm not going to let it affect my performance and affect what I'm trying to do here. I think he came in at a horrible time, and I think everyone can agree that it was a weak team, and he was dropped in at a really, really shit time to be dropped into it. As Maurice said, they should have let Mick finish out that campaign and see where it went from there, and they didn't. But he came in and he had to kind of build up a new squad. Like, they had him with the under-21s, and he was doing well with the under-21s. And rather than letting him, finish out that and letting Mick finish out his part and then come in after that, they just dropped him straight in because it was more convenient for them for whatever reason. So he had to take over that, and then he was trying to implement a certain style of football, and that style of football has started to take place when he started to promote up players from the under-21s team that he had been coaching. And I understand the results and things haven't been great, but they have been steadily improving as time's gone along. Like, I know Maurice says that he has so many, he doesn't have enough wins, but the first year he was here, he had no wins. Do you know what I mean? And there is a little bit of a difference here with him and previous managers, where a lot of previous managers came in and got to play a lot of friendly games. Friendly games don't really exist as much anymore because we have this the Nations League now.
The Nations League are all friendlies. They're all friendlies.
They are.
Don't let anyone tell
they
you
are to an extent, but people are teams try harder because they want to still win the cup in those. So whereas other coaches were coming in and they were playing, Oman and Moldova and teams like that in friendly games to build up their reputation, build up the team, get them playing the way they want.
Here's another one then, Ted. Here's another one then, Ted. On friendlies, all the friendlies that they've given this manager have been all terrible teams like New Zealand and teams like that, just so he get a few wins under the belt.
He hasn't played New Zealand. His friendlies have been England. It's been England, who he lost to, Qatar, who he beat when we were at home, drew when we were away, beat Andorra, drew with Hungary, beat Malta, lost to Norway, beat Lithuania, drew with Belgium, beat Latvia. There is friendly games there. Now, barring the draw to Qatar, none of them are terrible results. Norway, I would say, are a bit better of a team than us with the players they have, and England are definitely a better team than we are.
But are they the type of games that this manager should be having to test these players?
But he's trying to implement a brand new style of playing football. If he was playing more games like that before he was getting thrown into these competitive games, he could get that style of football into the players' heads, which he didn't get a chance to do because he was thrown straight into competitive games. And the only friendly game he got in his first year was to play England, who, that was in 2020 and they had a good squad. So, he didn't get a very good start in that sense. So he has to.
But Ted, I suppose the counter argument to that, Ted, is that every international manager in Europe is in that same boat, aren't they?
They are now, but the previous international managers weren't. So when people talk about, but look at the results of the previous managers, and people can say that all they want, but I remember when we had the likes of Martin O'Neill's and Trapattoni's, people weren't happy with them either because we weren't winning enough games and we weren't doing well enough. We're always complaining that we're not doing well enough, but then we're also at the same, on one hand, we're like, oh, we're not doing well enough internationally and we need to be doing better and the manager's not good enough and this and that. And on the other hand, yeah, but we don't have the players. This has been a constant rolling theme for Ireland for years upon years. And for years, we were just playing the same brand of football. And a manager's come in and in 34 games, which is what he's had, he's trying to change the style that we play in this football. And yes, it was terrible the first year, but it has slowly gotten better and better each year. And I understand that we're not always going to get the results we want, like the loss to Armenia and the loss to Luxembourg. They are terrible, terrible results. But
the performance against Greece, though, Ted, a couple of weeks ago, after a 10-day training camp, it was fucking terrible. It was one of the worst performances that he's had. So you can't say they're improving.
No, but we are improving overall. Like, again, we drew with Portugal in his second year and then we lost 2-1 to Portugal. And on paper, that isn't bad results against a Portuguese squad that are much, much better than us as well. He's implementing a system where he's getting 5 or 6 games a year to try and drill this into Irish players' head. And he has to get rid of these older players who were trained under a very different system of get the ball, pump it long and hope for the best. And that's what he's trying to do here. Now, whether he goes at the end of this campaign or not, the big question will be on the FAI. Will the FAI hire another manager that will continue to try and develop Irish football, which is what he said. He's trying to improve Irish football as a whole, which is what he's trying to do. Are the FAI going to try to continue along that route, or are they going to just go out, get a manager who'll play, pump the ball long and hope for the best? And as Mark said earlier, with guys like Evan Ferguson in our front line, that's not really the style of football we need to be playing. We need to get players that are going to be able to take that ball in the midfield and be able to play it out. And that's what Stephen Kenny's trying to do. So that will benefit us if we can manage to learn to do that.
I don't think the FAI are concerned about the style of play. I'd say the FAI are more concerned about qualifying for the finals of tournaments and getting that good paper in the door. That's what I'd say they're more concerned about than
of course they
especially
are.
At a very high level and stuff like that. I think personally, I think he'll go at the end of this campaign. So because I don't see it running out very well.
I'd agree that I think he probably will go at the end of this campaign if they can find someone who wants to take on a poison chalice, because that's what Ireland is. Any manager that comes in and takes the Irish team,
anyone's going to have a better win ratio than this guy. Anyone that comes in, they'll be under pressure. What, 29%? You got to be better than this guy. I think a lot of people out there fancy.
Yeah, I think it'd be hard pressed to find a new manager on £500,000 a year, or maybe a little bit more if they have to bump it up, that's going to drop below 29%. I think you'd have to be very, very bad to drop below that.
But Frank Lampard bad.
But if a new manager comes in and continues to play this brand of football that has had to be implemented, they're already starting at a foot, with a further foot forward than Stephen Kenny was, because he had to lay the groundwork. That's an important part that you have to remember. Like, he is trying to change how we play, and I do agree that he tried to do it all too quickly, where he was just like, no more pumping it long, get rid of that. It needed to be a smoother transition.
I think the fact that he had to blood 18 players says a lot about the previous regimes. You know what I mean? That's the guts of a squad there, if you think about it. But he still make the point that he still has, the guts of 13, 14 players hanging around from his first squad, which would lead you to believe that his development into the first team isn't all that it's made out to be. I mean, blooding a player, like he's talking about blooding 18 players. We're 3 of them blooded in a couple of those friendlies that didn't really matter and were pied off. You know, is that really blooding a player? To me, blooding a player is you bring him in for a series of games and
he doesn't know his best 11 either, which is a massive problem.
No, and I think what he's done is I think he's put out a narrative there about how he culturally wants to change the way we play football, Irish football, from the long ball to actually playing football. And that in one respect has to be commended. But I think when you put that out there, you know, you kind of die on that sword as well. If you don't have the tools to do it, but you're stubborn enough to continue on with it and stuff like that. I think if another manager comes in, I think pending if he's Irish or if he's not Irish, I think you have a different narrative. Because I think with Kenny as well, I think Kenny was trying to nearly develop the legacy before he went on the pathway of the job kind of thing. Because I think he did come in from the 21s with a very, very good record and stuff like that. But I think he was trying to continue on some sort of a legacy here about he nearly reinvented Irish football or something like that, rather than focusing on the results. I think if you get a guy in, I think if you get, say, like a Chris Hughton, and I know Ian mentioned him earlier, and we'll talk about some of the candidates and get your thoughts on that. But if you mention the likes of, say, Chris Hughton will come in. He's a very clever, very astute manager. He was also, I think he was a technical advisor for Ghana, I think, in the World Cup as well, as far as I know. I think it was Ghana, as far as I know.
I think he's managing Ghana.
Is he managing now? Did the guy get, like,
as far as I know, yeah.
I think our ex-player was managing, wasn't he? Yeah. Maybe he's managing them now. So, like, I think if he was to come in, I don't think he would be as consumed about changing the world of football and how it's played in Ireland and that cultural whole thing, more so than the actual the results and getting to the finals of tournaments and stuff like that, and how important that is. And I think Maurice's point earlier is a real good one as well, that what we're trying to do is we're trying to change that culture into a passing culture and a footballing culture. But some of the games we just can't do that, because we don't have it when we go up against, say, the better teams or whatever it is. We need to take a more pragmatic approach to get the result or get the draw or get the points that we need to give us that chance to qualify. And I think what happens is the approach is kind of the same all the time. And like, let's be honest here, like, we've had a couple of good showings. The showing against France, I think, was a good showing, although we lost. The showing against Portugal was a real good showing. We can show what we can do. Again, we lost. But I think some of those results kick out, you know. When you see the drop-off from the French performance to the Greek performance, is massive, poles apart, you know. And that's where the concern is, that he just can't seem to, he can't seem, in whatever way his approach is, to hold it together. I think he played the Greek game with a lot of fear. I think when he went out in the French game, I think what he did was he put the players out there to play with no fear at all, because we weren't expected to get anything, and if we got anything, it would be amazing. So it was kind of a throwaway game nearly. So the guys were allowed to go out and express themselves. I think if you look
that happens
at the
a lot
game,
with the Irish team.
Yeah,
a lot with Irish teams, where when we play those bigger teams, we kind of say to the players, you know, fucking go out, try something, try and do it. And then when we play these games, we should win. The managers are so concerned with, like, not losing. It's the wrong mentality. We're more concerned about not losing than we are with winning. And that's not just Stephen Kenny. That's been every manager we've had for donkey's years, all the way back to Jack Charlton and everything. More concerned with not losing than we are with winning games. And that's something that we need to start changing, because we shouldn't be going out with fear against Greece. Yes, a healthy amount of fear of losing a game is necessary. Every team should go out with the expectation that they can be beat. Do you know what I mean? Like, we beat Germany. Germany should never have been fearful of us, but they got too proud and things like that. But I do agree, like, that we went out and we were too timid. Like, maybe there was too many defensive players put on, and that shouldn't have been the case.
Yeah, Sean, Trapattoni won how many leagues and European Cups? He never mentioned them once when in charge of Ireland. I think Trapattoni's situation is kind of different. He had a very, very good contract. He was paid a lot of money, and he was in for quite a big windfall. What I would say about that, to counter that, and Ian will probably like this one, there's another manager out there who's been a sensational manager and one of the greats. And he spoke about football heritage when he came under pressure as well. and he spoke about a lot of things as well. One Jose Mourinho. So I don't think that kind of sits. I think when it suits these managers, when they're taken to task, and I mean, let's be honest, Trapattoni was never taken to task. Let's be honest. Most of the time he spent his time in press conferences and in interviews pretending that he didn't even understand English and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
So he didn't really care, did he? Like,
no,
in all honesty, he didn't
well, look
care.
at what he was getting paid. Why would you?
Yeah.
And he wouldn't have had any kind of allegiance to it either, you know. The most slappable head of Irish managers out there too. Absolutely. He's the hangman page on books of football. Don't need advice. Yeah, it doesn't need advice. Jamino's in us again. Stephen Kenny's a terrible manager. We have a decent team. We've been hyped up a lot, but poor management is the reason we're not in a better position. Yeah, and where are you coming from in that, Jamino? Are you thinking like from a tactical point of view and stuff like that? Are you talking about going out to have a plan against certain teams and stuff like that? Or Ian's in, he took a shit in a bus. That's where he applied his trade. He's taking a lot of shits on buses tonight, isn't he? Jamino's in, we will get stuffed against both France and the Netherlands. We won against Gibraltar too. Paper over the cracks. And he'll do the same thing in a few months' time again. I don't know whether a win against Gibraltar papers over the cracks. Let's be like, we were playing Gibraltar and at halftime we were 0-0, lads. You know what I mean?
I'll tell you a funny one, Ted. About I was at the game, right, and at halftime I was like, "Oh my fucking god, this is terrible." I turned to the guy beside me, and he's a Cork man. He goes, "Don't worry, mate. Stephen Kenny has this under control. He's just tiring them out." That's what he said to me at halftime in the Gibraltar game.
Tell you, we have them on the ropes.
Oh,
we have them on the ropes,
yeah.
Maurice.
Yeah.
Jamino's in. What do you think of this one, lads? Mick McCarthy would have got us to the Euros. We should have beaten Slovakia if it wasn't for Conor Hourihane. And we definitely would have beaten Northern Ireland in the playoff final. They're worse than us. Are Northern Ireland worse than us?
One, I don't think Northern Ireland are worse than us. And two, if Mick McCarthy would have got us to the Euros, why didn't we stick with him? That wasn't Stephen Kenny's fault that we didn't stick with him. You know what I mean? There was more to that.
Ted.
Somebody else dropped Mick McCarthy, and whether that was Mick McCarthy not feeling that he was up to that task.
No, do you know what the problem was? Because there was a big delay during COVID, and his contract was meant to coincide with the end of that playoffs, and then when shit hit the fan, everything got moved in between contracts.
That was a big fury about the date on the contract. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I understand that, but if Mick McCarthy thought that, if Mick McCarthy felt very confident that he would have beaten that team, would he? You know, if you were that confident, would you not have taken the job and said, like, listen, give me another 6 months on the contract. I'll go and do it. There's an extra few bob in my pocket. If you were confident that you were going to win and get the team to the Euros, you'd have taken another 6 or 7 month contract, wouldn't you?
Well, hindsight's a great thing, isn't it? Hindsight's a great thing.
Well, I don't think he was offered it, Ted. I think they just see.
I don't think
they already
I
had
think,
that agreement.
I think there was a very suiting of themselves in terms of that time when they looked at things and all. And I think I think the money he was looking for as extra was in around the Kenny money for a full-time job or something like that. But there was a big thing there, absolutely. Jamino's in. The only relevant teams we played in friendlies were England and Belgium. Everyone else is shit or mediocre.
That's always been the case.
Everyone else is kind of in around our own ranking, isn't it? I mean, what, Greece are four below us in the ranking or something like that. So we were playing poor football under our previous managers, but at least we could get the results when it really mattered.
Yes.
See,
well, yes, and no.
All that matter.
Yeah,
results are all that matter. That's all that matters. Look at one of the biggest teams in Europe, Atletico Madrid. Look at their style of play. Fucking dreadful. Massive club, but they get trophies. You can't tell me that we weren't getting enjoy.
But we're not getting trophies. But we're not getting trophies when we get to a competition. But bar the 2002 World Cup, when we've got to a competition, we've gotten smashed around and got fucked out in the first round. That's not a level of success that we should be aspiring to. Yes, we qualified. We're going to get smashed and knocked out in the first fucking.
That should be minimum expectation, Ted. There should be minimum expectation to qualify.
Not at the style of football we have. No, that's what you want, but that's not what you should be like. What you want and what should be considered a success are two different things. Qualifying for a tournament just so that you get smashed and knocked out of it isn't really that great a success. That's like, if that's your success story.
So it doesn't matter then. It's the groups don't matter then, as long as we're playing this mad expansive football, and it doesn't matter if we qualify or not.
No, it does
qualifying
matter,
for a massive tournament for a country like us is everything, Ted. We're never going to win a World Cup or anything like that. But qualifying it just gives.
We're not going to,
you know
because
yourself,
we can't.
It gives the whole country a lift.
We're not going to win if we
it's
play the style of football that we've been playing, because you can't win. Like, you can't really win tournaments by just booting the ball long the whole time at an international level, where every game is basically a cup final. What Stephen Kenny did, he tried to change that.
Yeah.
And yes, it hasn't worked so far. And yes, we haven't qualified for a tournament. But like, when we were qualifying for tournaments, bar that 2002 one, we've gone in, got hockeyed, got fucked out. And like, people say to me, yeah, but it's a success.
We did in 88 and 90, and I know we're going back.
No, but I said, but that's what I said,
Yeah.
since 2002. I know previously we did do well, but since 2002, we've qualified, got hockey, got fucked out. Like, that's not, like, yes, it's a slight bit more successful. We might have won one, maybe two extra games in the whole year, and then went on to play a couple of fucking other ones that we drew, and then got fucked out with a tournament. That's not success, lads. That's fucking shite. Like, if that's all we're aspiring to be.
If that's not success, Ted. If that's not success, then what's this manager?
Yeah, but I'm not saying this manager's been
he'll never get us to a major tournament.
But I'm not saying
Never.
he's beat.
But if you're saying getting to a major tournament and losing, if you're saying getting to a major tournament and losing is a failure, then what's Stephen Kenny?
Yeah, but I'm not saying that Stephen Kenny's been a success. I'm saying that what he's tried to do is change it so that when we do get to these tournaments, that we have a better chance of winning, because you have a better chance of winning games when you have possession of the ball than when every time you get it, you fuck it back at the other team. Do you know what I mean? Which is what we had been doing. Well, you have more of a chance. It doesn't mean that you will win every game, but you do definitely stand more of a chance of winning a game when you have more possession of the ball. That's definitely true.
Not for every team. It
Yeah,
depends.
not
style of plays.
Yeah, not if you're going into a match and that's your strategy or your tactic, then it's a different situation. Jamino's in. I would rather play long ball and boring football if it gets us the results. Didn't Shane Long's crucial goal against Germany come from a long ball? It did indeed.
Yeah,
it did. Yeah.
And Mark is in. At the end of the day, it's unfortunate, but Kenny just can't get results over the line. With the break now till September, why not get someone? I agree he has tried to change the style, but it ain't working. Yeah, it's definitely not working, and I think it's kind of like, I suppose the problem with the change at the moment is there's two factors. First of all, we know the finances of the FAI is a little bit all over the place with everything that's gone on and stuff like that and all. So the real questions are here: one, do they have the money to pay Stephen Kenny off? And two, have they got the money to attract in a manager of the caliber that we'd want to get in? You know, and that's the real dilemma as well. You know, if you're going to take Stephen Kenny out and bring another Stephen Kenny equivalent in, then you're going to have a problem, aren't you? I mean, it's just not going to work. And that brings us on nicely. Some of the candidates that were put out there, obviously Chris Hughton was one of them. He was the hot favourite a week or two ago when it came about. Damien Duff was in there. I'm not sure whether Damien Duff and the FAI would ever, although they brought Roy Keane back in, so who knows. Keith Andrews is in there. Obviously, he's in the setup already. Neil Lennon is in there. Let us know your thoughts on it. Roy Keane is in there. Robbie Keane obviously just took the job in Israel at the moment. Michael O'Neill, Sam Allardyce. I don't think Sam Allardyce is taking the Ireland job for, you know, as you go down in the betting, the money is going up, you know. Jose Mourinho was 26-1.
That's not happening.
Gareth Southgate was 26-1 and stuff like that. So this is the list that was put out there. So of that list that's out there, I mean, what are we looking at? Keith Andrews, Neil Lennon, maybe at the time Robbie Keane.
Neil Lennon would probably do better than Kenny. Keith Andrews, I'm not so sure.
Yeah. But do you see,
would Neil Lennon come in for what we're offering if we're only offering the same as what we're offering to Stephen Kenny at the moment? I don't know that he'd come in to take an international job at that price.
Well, I think if you want to bring in a better manager, you're going to have to offer better money.
No, you definitely are, but that's
now,
my
whether
point.
They can afford to do it or not is another question.
And that's part of the problem. Like, if you kick Kenny out, who are you getting in? Because if we don't have the money to get someone who's already definitely going to be a better quality because they want more money, who are you bringing in? Like, that's one of the major questions about. This is why I'm not necessarily Kenny out, because who are you bringing in if you get rid of him? Like, honestly, who's coming in that's going to...
Look, someone has to be better than this guy, Ted. Look at the results. You know, bringing someone in of a higher level. I don't know. Like, it can't get any worse than this.
Yeah. Sean's in, we need to do something what Croatia do with their youth and development technician type midfielders. Yeah, absolutely. They've put in a whole structure in there and stuff like that, and they've invested a lot of money in it. That's produced that level of talent. But they've also on their way as well been very, very successful. And at times they've had to play within their means as well, which is kind of what we're not trying to do. We're trying to play a totally different brand of football, regardless of whether it's in our means or not, or the talent that we have. So that's kind of, for me, that's a little bit flawed as well, that if you're just going to go out there with this kind of approach and you don't have the talent to do it, that's kind of a flawed setup as well. Mark, for me, we should be going for Lee Carsley. Thoughts on that, lads? Lee Carsley, he wasn't on the list here even. He's England under 21s, isn't he? Yeah, at the moment, yeah, absolutely.
So that's a pretty. That's not an easy job to get either. So they're obviously keeping an eye on him. So
I would say we'd be lucky. I would say he's not going to come to us at all. I would say he's looking at when Southgate gets the pump. Yeah, when Southgate gets pumped out, that he's going to be stepping up. I don't think he's going to risk leaving the England under 21s to come to us unless somebody else gets put into that top England spot when Southgate gets put out. Then he might turn his nose somewhere else. But for the moment, I can't
see him getting it. I can't see him being offered the England job.
I wouldn't have thought so either.
I'm not necessarily saying that he will be, but I'd say he'll hold out.
You mean in his mind, Ted? In his mind,
he's going to go, I'm not going to take the Ireland job because that definitely means I'm not getting the England job. Do you know what I mean? Now, once somebody else gets the England job, then maybe he'll look elsewhere, but he won't until that happens. Like,
Big up, Doug. I'm amazed Stephen Kenny is still in Cathedral. Yeah, absolutely. It is a weird one. Charge of Ireland's. So let's just not try and qualify.
I don't think that's what he was saying.
No, that's not what I'm saying. No. What I'm saying is that we're trying to change our style of football, and it is like, and I do understand that this is an international level, so it is very different. But it is 34 games. If you're trying to change the style of a football club, 34 games is like, that's not that many games in the grand scheme of things. Do you know what I mean? And like, you don't have them every week, so it's not like you're training these boys every week. I'm not saying don't try and qualify, but I'm just saying when we were playing pump the ball long, people were fucking complaining anyway. You know, we're not good enough. We need to be playing better football. This is shit to watch. So no matter what we do, we're going to get complaints. You know. Oh, but I
never heard anyone in the Charlton era complaining about the style of football we were playing, bar Eamon Dunphy.
Yeah, well, Charlton's era was a bit different because, you know, you could pass the ball back to your goalkeeper, you could pick it up and pump it even further along.
Yeah,
but I do get
and
your
also
point,
to go on Jaminho's point as well, I never heard Jack Charlton ever talking about what he had achieved in the game.
No, but the game has come along a lot since then, and like, there's no denying that over the last few years, people have complained about every manager we've had. They didn't like our style of football. We should be playing a better style of football, and now we have a manager in who's tried to do that, and whether it's worked or not, like, it is the groundwork had to be laid by somebody. And was that manager always going to be the one that was successful with it? Probably not. But if the next manager comes in and continues that to build on that groundwork, then in hindsight, when we look back in 20 years, what Stephen Kenny did will be seen as quite important and integral to Irish football if it does change to that style. Now, that'll all depend on who the
FAI go down the history books, Ted.
But it'll depend on what the FAI do when they hire the next manager. Because if they hire another manager who's just going to go, you aren't good enough to do that, just kick it long and shut the fuck up, then all of what he did is for naught anyway. Like, the FAI need to be as involved in this project as the manager they're hiring.
Ted, it's not about style of play. Not everything's about style of play, and that's all I hear about Stephen Kenny's style of play.
No,
but I just don't see it.
But what I'm saying is,
at the end of the day, that's all it's about. Winning games.
But what I'm saying is, before we had Stephen Kenny, that's what people were complaining about. If we won a game, it was like, oh, great, we won a game. But then when we lost a game, it was like, we're losing the game because all we do is kick it long. We need to play a better brand of football. So the complaints are going to be there one way or the other. You either have to accept that we're just going to kick it long, and then everyone, and if that's what everyone wants, that's fine. Everyone can agree to that, but then they can shut the fuck up when the next manager comes in and it starts getting booted long and we're not winning games. Shut the fuck up. If people want to do that, then I don't want to hear a complaint about the brand of football being shit. even if we're losing games. Because what the fuck you complain about? That was the complaint when we were doing it. So you have to pick a lane here. If you want to see a better brand of football, you have to take the risk that we're going to have to get there at some point. You have to lay the foundations. You have to build on it. If the next manager comes in and just starts booting it long again, all of what Stephen Kenny did is completely wasted anyway. So, and if people then complain about that manager in a year or two, we need to be playing a better brand of football. Well, they can fuck off if they are complaining about Stephen Kenny and then complaining about that when it happens in 2 years. They need to pick something that they either care or they don't care, one or the other.
Yeah, see, I think the problem is, I think if a new manager comes in, I don't think it's not that he will necessarily go away from what's being trying to be laid as a foundation, but I think he'll just be, I think that the other manager coming in will be a little bit more clever in the way he approaches things. I don't think he'll just purely go one way or the other way. I think he'll kind of find a happy medium somewhere in between. Because, I mean, we've often heard in the past and stuff like that, like the midfield was always a bone of contention with Wezzo and stuff like that and all, and that if Wezzo was in there, he plays a different brand of football that makes things happen and stuff like that, and why didn't we use him and why didn't we play him and all that kind of stuff and all.
But people don't care about that brand of football, Niall. That's what I'm hearing now.
But I mean,
they did then. Do you know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. If you cared about it then, but you don't care about it now, then you can't complain about that we weren't doing that brand of football, and then when we start doing it, and it's still not getting us the results, you can't then complain that brand of football is not good enough because you were complaining that we weren't doing it before. Like, this is what my point is. I'm happy enough for people to say they don't want Stephen Kenny in and they don't want us playing this brand of football. But in 2 years, if a new manager comes in and starts and decides to completely revert back to the fucking Jack Charlton era of get the ball and pump it long, all of those people can fuck off if they want to then complain about, oh, we need to play a better brand of football. Even if we're losing,
just care about results. That's all.
I'm not necessarily saying you, Maurice, but like I'm saying, over the years, this is what I've seen from plenty of people that I know and that, you know, that I'd be friends with, I might be friends with. But the people have complained about the brand of football for years. And now we have a manager who's trying to improve the brand of football. And that those same people are complaining, oh, he needs to be kicking it long. So they're just not going to be happy either way. So they need to pick a lane and fucking stick to that lane. Boot it long and hope for the best. Or take our lumps and try and improve as a nation at passing the ball around and moving up the field a bit better.
But Ted, is there a happy medium in this situation where we do a bit of both? There is a happy medium,
yeah.
Like obviously there's certain teams where we can go out there and we can play football against them to get results. There's other teams we're going out on the pitch and we know that they're levels above us, that the quality's better. Like when we take the pitch against a France or a Holland or whatever it is and stuff like that. Is that the time where we instigate a different kind of tactic formation mentality or whatever it is? And I think is that where it comes flawed with Stephen Kenny, where it's kind of the same approach every time.
But it is, and it does need to be a bit more of a blend. He did go too hard trying to go completely to playing out from the back, but I think he has learned that over the last few years, because when we did play against France recently and lost 1-0, we weren't always trying to play out from the back. We did put some long balls and stuff up, and I think he's realized his mistake now, whether he admits it in those press conferences or not, saying that, you know, he's not listening to these criticisms. I think he has taken on those criticisms, and I think he has tried to alter the way he's playing football and integrate both of them into a blended mix. So, you know, if he's willing to do that, I do think that's something for us to build upon. But to me, it's just, results are the only thing that matters. But we're only playing, like, say, six games a year. And we might, like, under previous managers, we might have been winning one more game per year than we're winning now. Do you know what I mean? It's not like, you know, like the most wins we ever had under Martin O'Neill in any campaign in competitive games was 4, right? Now, last year, we had 2 competitive wins under Stephen Kenny. So it is the guts of two wins. And we have 1 win this season or in this competitive campaign so far. Do you know what I mean? So it is a thing that it is down to. I understand what people are saying.
We'll match it again,
results, but it's
we beat Gibraltar.
Sorry?
We'll match it again, the 2 when we beat Gibraltar.
Yeah, and if we manage to get another one, yeah, that'll be 3.
If we manage to beat them away.
Yeah, and I do understand that. But
I think we'll be okay on that one.
But when we're talking when we're talking 3 and 4 wins under previous managers, those are the likes of beating Georgia and Moldova as well. You know, like we were always only ever really beating these lower teams since the 2000s. Do you know what I mean? Since then, it's always only been those lower teams that we're beating. Really, we get the odd win against a Germany or an Italy or something like that, but it's not consistent.
Here's a question for both of you. When I look at the Irish situation, I wonder about the players' mentality and, you know, how important international football is in their life, and is pulling on the jersey what it should be. And I go back to, you know, when I followed Ireland, you know, in the 80s and the 90s and stuff like that. And, you know, the country was going through a terrible time. The country's still going through a crisis now. But back then it was in the depths of nearly a depression, as they say, and stuff like that. And really what Jack Charlton and the players did back then really is it's unbelievable and heralded really in how they took the country out of that situation, gave us hope, you know, gave the country, you know, took the country back up off the canvas like a boxing match and gave us hope that, yeah, we're a big deal in this world. We could be proud of what we were and all that kind of stuff, because we were really in a bad place. Now, you know, you go forward 30, 40 years, whatever it is at this stage, and we find ourselves, the country's in a crisis again. It's a slightly different crisis, you know, but still very, very important and still affects people to this day. And the only hope and the only escape that people have at times, because of homelessness, because of the housing crisis, because of the cost of living crisis, and all this other stuff that just destroys people and families, the only hope they sometimes have is sport and the Irish team. And they go and they see this Irish team kind of, you know, getting slapped up by Greece and stuff like that. And it just, I think it adds to people's woes in terms of how they perceive their next 4 or 5 days, their next week's work and stuff like that. They feel beat up again. They follow this team and stuff like that. There's a certain hope that people hang on to in terms of Irish sport and stuff like that. And that gets them through their week. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think, you know, we talk about things like mental health and depression and all that kind of stuff that people carry with them, sometimes not even diagnosed and stuff like that. We know how we feel about, you know, when our team wins at the weekend, we're pumped up and we're delighted.
Oh, yeah.
If our team loses at the weekend, we're kind of depressed and down and fed up and all, you know. So it carries a big weight of expectation. I don't know whether these players realise how important it is to the whole of the country in terms of putting on the weight of that jersey and walking out on that pitch, and what has gone before them, and how important it was. And I wonder, do they understand that, or do they see things like, you know, having to come over? They've gone through a tough season. They've been playing for 9 months, 10 months, whatever it is, World Cup in the middle of it and all that kind of stuff. And then they have these games bolted on at the end of the season. So instead of heading off to Barbados or wherever they go at the end of the season and stuff like that, they have to hang around for another bunch of international games. I'm not sure whether sometimes the heart is in there where it should be in terms of pulling on that jersey and stuff like that. What do you think?
I'd agree with you. I think, like, I know we used Declan Rice and Jack Grealish as an example earlier. Even if Roy Keane had English heritage, right, and that England had come calling to Roy Keane saying, you know, you played for the Irish under 21s and you've been fucking brilliant. Do you want to come play for us? There's not a hope that a lad like Roy Keane wouldn't have put on the Irish jersey. Like, nothing would have stopped him, because the pride of his country, you know, like, he would have played for his country regardless. Do you know what I mean? And that's what you're saying. Do some of these players want to come and play for their country? No, they don't, is the truth. Like, those older players did want to come and play for their country. Roy Keane wouldn't have missed a game because he was tired. Do you know what I mean? Like, that is, or that he wanted to go on a fucking holiday. That, and I do understand he walked out on the team in 2002, but that was over a feeling of disrespect from the FAI. Do you know, like, that's how seriously he took his football. It was never about that he didn't want to play that tournament. He did want to play that tournament. But I do think a lot of players now they're not too concerned with playing for their country, especially in Ireland. They're not all that concerned. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you really wanted to play for your country, you'd be out there giving it everything you've got. Do you know what I mean? And that's what you see with teams like, you know, the World Cup. You see, like, Ziyech is a great example. Like he's not performing when he's playing at a club level at Chelsea, but he was a different animal when he put on his country's jersey. Do you know what I mean? That country jersey means something to some players, and I don't think that we have a lot of Irish players that seem to show that it means that much to them to be playing for their national team. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, Sean is in. It's far easier to qualify for Euros, World Cups now than in the 80s. Only 8 teams qualified for Euros in 88 then. The only counter argument to that, Sean, is I think international football has come a long way with the emergence of all these other nations and the breakup in Europe of these countries into smaller countries and stuff like that. But I think it's also changed as well. If you look at the World Cup scene, the emergence of the African nations and the job that they've done there and how brilliant their players are and stuff like that, I think it's a lot more difficult now. I firmly believe now there is no easy international games. I think some are slightly easier, but they're not easy in terms of, and if you look at our results and stuff like that, you look at Greece. Greece are 4 below us in the ranking or whatever it is, and still absolutely turned us over. And let's be honest, that Greek game, only for Gavin Bazunu, they could have been out of sight. Let's be honest here. Yeah. But I think I do believe I don't believe now it's easier. A lot of these countries now have latched onto international football in terms of their economies, in terms of all that kind of stuff, and they've developed it at grassroots level. And international football now to a lot of these smaller countries and stuff like that and emerging countries has become a huge deal now. You look at even the likes of Iceland and Finland and all these other teams and how they have some of their players playing in the championship and aware in the Premier League and kind of stuff like that and all. Years ago,
even
that was
US.
unheard of. And the US, look at the US players that have come in. Even Canada is developing as well. You look at the African nations, Australia. Look at Australia in the World Cup and stuff like that now. I think international football now is way harder. Plus, you're also getting a lot more. If you look at those international teams, they tend to be bringing in foreign coaches of a much better standard as well, in terms of developing their stuff and all. So I'm not too sure I fully agree with that. I get what you're talking about in terms of the numbers and stuff like that, but I think it's more difficult. Players in Jack's era have a pair of bollocks and backbone. Gave everything on the pitch compared to nowadays. And Mark is in. One more thing I will say is that a lot of, hang on, we have to hit that one, of the lads we have are championships, so play twice a week, every week, so it does take it out of them, rather than nations that have lads playing once a week in Prem every week. Yeah, absolutely.
That is a fair point as well. Like maybe the lads are just that bit more tired, but it does feel like I'd agree with you, Niall. I do feel that there's a lot of players that if they were given the option to play or not for their country, that they, they'll play for their country because they want to say they played for the country, but they don't seem super fussed one way or the other. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's hard to know when you watch it, Maurice. I suppose from your point of view, it's hard to know when you watch it. It's sometimes just like you look at that Greek game. It was so fragmented. It was so disjointed. Maurice said they had all this time to prepare for this game. Probably the longest camp an international team would ever have, apart from being away at the finals. And they just looked terrible. Greek just passed through us so easy. We couldn't pass a ball. Most of the passes, if you look at, especially in the first half, were absolute hospital passes. We were lucky that lads didn't get heavily injured and stuff. The passing was so poor. But we couldn't even the thoughts of even switching the play from the right to the left and trying to open them up and stretch them and stuff like that. I mean, I've seen one passage of play for about 5 minutes. That was 5 lads all on the right-hand side of the pitch, just playing the ball between themselves. And your man was over on the left side doing this, hello, I'm here, hello, wide open. Never thought of switching the play, which to me at that level should be a very basic thing. Switch the play, stretch the team, open the match up.
Now, I do have to ask, when you see something like that, right, people will say that kind of falls to the manager as well. But the manager's obviously said to the player to be out on that other wing as well. So is that down to the players on the pitch that they aren't taking the chance to make that pass? Or is that the manager has told some guy to call for the ball on the left, but then keep the ball on the right here? I would say that's more down to the players on the pitch to open their eyes and to recognize that pass there. And I'm not, that this isn't just take everything away from the manager, but I do think a lot of times people will say things like, the manager needs to do better. But sometimes you look at things and you're like, well, the manager can't do it for you. Like, the manager can't put the ball in the fucking net for some of these boys. Like, some of the chances that we did miss against Gibraltar, even in the first half, like, some of the chances we missed were criminal. Like, you should, like, a lad on a five-a-side pitch missing them is getting fucking roasted about it for the next week in the group chat. Do you know what I mean? And for those things, it's kind of, can't blame a manager on some of that stuff either.
Yeah, Sean makes this point as well. When you see
the
national pride and passion from similar sized countries like Croatia, see the passion in when they sing their anthems and stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, obviously, some countries are more about that. Like when we see the French one and the Argentinian one and stuff like that. Obviously, it's massive and stuff like that. You know, they'll be belting it out. And the Italians, of course, is always massive. Then there's other countries where it's quite more tame, but they still go out and play. So yeah, but I get your point. That's what I often question. I often find, dude, the lads going out on the pitch share the same passion of the people paying in the stands, and that's where I tend to be coming from and stuff like that with those. Maurice, go ahead there. Sorry, I interrupt you.
No, I was just saying, like, about putting the ball in the net, and that's fair. That's a fair enough point. But if you look at the way football is nowadays, the buck just always falls in the manager, kind of in any top level job. So it shouldn't be any different with this one.
Players don't get sacked.
No, but it does.
Yes, it does. We had that discussion last week.
Yeah.
You did.
And I do agree that it does. In today's football, it always does seem to fall to the manager. But sometimes I think, like, if the manager didn't have a player out on the other wing screaming for the ball, then I'd be like, yeah, that's obviously the manager's tactic. But that's not a tactical decision to have him out there on the wing screaming for the ball and nobody giving it to him. Sometimes stuff like that just comes down to the on-field players, and if the on-field players aren't doing what's expected of them, that's a big issue as well. Like I found in the Greece game that we just weren't closing people down quick enough in defense, and these defenders know that they should be doing that. Like, no manager is telling their players step back, let them walk towards the net. No manager is telling defenders that.
Yeah. Do you think?
Yeah, but at one stage, we'd no formation or anything in that game. If you remember, there was a cluster of 5 or 6 players.
Oh yeah,
on the right hand side, all on top of each other. The pitch was wide open, and there was one guy down on the left, and it was just the whole thing was just a mess.
And maybe the manager did. Like, obviously, I wasn't in the dressing room, but I can't imagine any manager at any level is coming up with a tactic of put all of our players on one side of the pitch. I can't imagine that any manager set up tactically like that. Now, it is up to the manager to scream at those players to get the fuck back into positions they're meant to be in. I do agree with that. But sometimes I think that there's just this, I don't know, there's just this drifting in the Irish team where they kind of just switch off too much. Like, that they're not closing players down in defense, which, you know, they should be doing. And when they're playing at a club level, they are doing. And then, as you said, there was a lot of hospital passes like that really just put us in trouble. And that just shouldn't be happening either. At any level of football, do you know what I mean?
And as Maurice's point was made, that was after a 10-day camp.
Yeah, but
you know what I mean. So
but those hospital passes, that doesn't come down to the manager. Do you know what I mean? Like, that does come down to the player. If that player can't manage to pass the ball, like, what can the manager do? You can't come on and do it for him. Do you know what I mean?
Right, we'll round out with this then. Let's play devil's advocate and go the other way. Let's suppose the FAI was rolling in the dollar bills, and let's suppose they bring in Jose Mourinho, for example. Right, let's go way the other way, because that's what Kenny's done culturally. So we'll go that way as well. Maurice, if Jose Mourinho came in, what would you expect him to do? Apart from get results.
Get results. Get results. That's exactly what I expect him to do.
But
apart from that, he'd probably use similar players. There's good players there now. I think there's really good players there that someone can get the best out of. That's my opinion on it. And I think, like, just someone with, I wouldn't hire Jose personally. If I was to hire anyone, you'd probably laugh at me. I think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer would be fantastic for the Ireland job. That's who I'd pick. Of someone that's free.
So on that point then, Maurice, going to Ted, do we think then that the players don't believe in the project and the players don't believe in the management?
I think there's possibly some players there that don't. I think that these younger players he is bringing in, the Evan Fergusons and I can never remember the young lad's name, but the young lad off Celtic who plays in the middle of the park. I can never remember his name. He's come on the last couple of games. I think they believe in the project.
Johnson.
Sorry, Johnson, is it?
Is that Johnson?
Sam. Sam Johnson, is it?
I think that's him. Yeah, I think he's playing for Celtic now at the moment.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them players do believe in the project and they are trying to play a nicer brand of football. Like I think that young lad should be starting more games because he has a really good mind for the game, and getting someone like him, I'm not saying he's necessarily going to be as good as Wes Hoolahan was, but he looks like he could be, and having someone like him in the middle, being able to play the ball up to your Evan Fergusons and play the ball up to the Obafemis and things like that, I think that'll make a real change. So I think we need to see him starting more.
Sometimes, Ted, I look at those players and I agree with what you're saying, but sometimes I think that they're not being played or brought in as part of Kenny's project in his mind. More so, it's nearly being forced upon him at times. Like you look at Johnson when he came on. When he came on the other night, I think it was when he came on last week. I think it was against Gibraltar. I think he came on the back of an injury, wasn't he? As far as I know, maybe I'm wrong now, but I think
the issue for that Gibraltar game, we went in with a lot of the bench that we were meant to have injured already. So it was kind of a thing of we needed to make substitutes, and he was probably just one of the least injured players we had left on that bench because you have to field a certain amount of players on your bench. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I do think players like that are what we need kind of in the middle of our park now. We still need someone who's going to be doing the defensive work in the midfield. But I think there is older players there, the likes of your Hendricks and your McLeans and things that I don't think have entirely bought into what the manager wants to do. And I don't think even if they did buy into it, that they have it left in them to be able to play that style of football. You know what I mean?
And these are the ones, Maurice, he's been most loyal to.
He has, yeah, and that's a huge problem I've had. James McLean shouldn't be fucking near that team. Now he's definitely going to get another game because he has 99 caps. He's definitely going to get another game somewhere. All right, that's inevitable.
He's got 100 now.
No, he got us 100 against Gibraltar. He was the captain.
I thought Gibraltar was his 99th cap. Sorry.
No, that was 100. He got the 100. Yeah, because they presented him with the cap and all, remember?
Grand. Well, hopefully that's the end of it, and they've accepted that he's got his 100 games now, and he can be fucked off into the sun because he's playing for, I think, Wigan, who got relegated. I think that's who he's playing with. And I think they got relegated from the 2nd division down to the 3rd. That's not someone you want in your starting 11 at an international level. Like, he just needs to go. Like, he's been a good servant to the country. I never really rated him all that highly myself, but he always had the passion and the love for his country, which was nice to see, I guess. But players like that, I think, need to be let go and let these younger players come in and try and play this style of football. On the idea of Jose coming in, I don't know that Jose's built for international football to begin with, but I don't think.
Well, I was sort of putting that out there as name.
I don't think a player like, or I don't think a manager like Jose could handle the ineptitude of that Irish team at times. Do you know what I mean? As I said, they look like at times there has to be a plan that's out there, and then the boys can't even string a pass together. They're just killing each other with every single pass, and I think Jose would lose. Like, I think his head would explode if he was trying to manage a team that was doing that. You know what I mean? And it's not like he has weeks to fix them. You know, he has 3 days to fix them every time he sees them. That's not going to be enough for him. I think he'd lose his mind if he managed a team like Ireland.
Maurice, I'm sure you were delighted with the news yesterday that he's going to be in charge, I think, for the Holland and the France game in September or whenever it is. So they're sticking with him.
No one was going to take it, were they? Like, who's going to be mad enough to take that job at this point?
They're free hits anyway. They're free hits. That's what the Kenny supporters will say anyway. Free hits.
No, well, I'm not even saying free hits, but I'm saying what manager would be mad enough to take over now when a campaign looks like it's dead and buried already.
Well, that's probably exactly when you should take over, isn't it? Because there's no pressure on you at all. You can figure out what's going on in the squad. No one's expecting you to qualify, so it doesn't really matter. It's been binned off. So it's in theory, it's like having whatever's left 3 or 4 friendlies.
I know, yeah, but no one's going to want to do that because then you're coming in and, you know, if things just go really badly at the start, then you're already at the point of imagine you come in, right?
But the expectations in the gutter anyway.
Yeah, the expectation might be in the gutter, right? But if you come in and you're on 4 losses, right, in your first couple of games, right, then the next season when you start your first full campaign, you're already 0-4, and then people are going, well, it's a results-based business, and he's, you know, in his first 10 games he lost, and you're going to come up against a Germany or a France or something, so you can probably agree that you're going to lose another couple of games, and then by the time you've played 20 games, well, he's already lost, you know, 10 to 12 games. Like, this is a results-based business. No one is going to be insane enough to come in and take that, where it's already you know, where you're just pumping losses into yourself at the start. Do you know what I mean?
I'm not sure, Racers. Ireland needs a management style similar to Gareth Southgate's style of play. I'm not sure about that. I think Gareth Southgate's just very lucky that he has a great pool of players to pick from and to choose. I think Gareth Southgate's style of play is in question a lot of time, where he has shackled players at times when England were on the cusp of creating history. So I'm not too sure about that now. But boy, I'd love Ireland to have the pool of talent that he has available.
If we had the pool of talent, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Is the one thing about it? Really,
we also wouldn't have Stephen Kenny as manager either. That's
exactly.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. But listen, lads, it was great having you on. Went an hour and 35. I wasn't expecting it to go that long, but it was good. It was a good chat and a good debate about things and stuff like that. I think we've all kind of concluded at this stage that we kind of like what he's trying to do, but he probably doesn't have the tools to do it, or the players. But he's probably going to hit the exit door fairly soon, depending on what the FAI have planned.
I think once this campaign's over, he's probably going to be let go. But it'll depend on it'll depend if somebody takes up the mantle. Like, if nobody jumps at the 500 grand a year that they're offering, they're just going to leave him there, aren't they?
I don't know whether they get away with leaving him there.
Last game.
Yeah, I don't know whether they get away with leaving him there, but certainly they might not bring in the next person. Might not be the person that we actually want either. So let's see what happens. This could be a while before this is fixed up due to finances and all the other stuff that's going on in the background. But we'll see what happens. As always, Maurice, tell us what you're doing on the channel. What's happening? What's coming up this week? Drop us now a spoiler or two if you happen to tell us.
Got two shows tomorrow. One with Bull Buchanan, one with an Irish band called Mike Got Spiked that are returning for their first gig in 10 years. So I'm doing a live show with them tomorrow night. Fun guys. And then I'm going into July. I'm kind of booking everything up now at the moment, but I have enough to keep me going. Twists and turns along the way. DJing this weekend, very busy weekend. Oh yeah, just wanted to give a quick shout out to a friend of ours, Niall, that got married today, Mr. Richard Keys. Congratulations, Richard.
Good Lord, did you see that? Sent it to me earlier. Did you see that today, Ted?
No, I didn't.
Ted, I'll send you on the link. Go on to Sports Bible. Morris sent that on. Good Lord, don't even get me started on that.
It's a good story,
God.
Ted.
He hands himself in more ways than one, I'd say. But let's not get into that. Morris, where can people find you?
Just type in GP Productions podcast and you'll find me there talking to porn stars and wrestlers.
The Vince Russo of the booking office for GP Productions podcast, no doubt about it. Ted, what are you up to? Let us know. Let people know where they can find you and what's coming up or what's happening.
Yeah, so we'll have a show going up later today that Greg ran for us with the boys from For the Love of Horror, who run a convention every year. They also run a couple of other conventions throughout the year, like sci-fi ones and stuff over in England. But Greg had them on for a recast episode. They were recasting the 2004 Dawn of the Dead. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, the two hosts there battling off against each other to see who can impress Greg the most with their picks. And then as you know yourself, Niall, coming up, we have a football style show of the Retrotainment Reel, where we took strikers from the Premier League and pit them against each other, 32 strikers. It'll be split into 2 shows because those shows always tend to run a bit long because everyone's discussing the strikers and why they'd vote for this person and not for this person. That'll be coming up as well soon enough now as well.
Awesome. Brilliant stuff. Don't forget, folks, go out and obviously subscribe to both channels. Give them all your support and love as much as you can. Big thank you to everyone in the chat. Thank you for taking part in this. we'll probably do more of this stuff as we go along. No doubt Maurice will be on live straight away the minute Kenny gets the boot, celebrating. No doubt about it. I just
I'll
wonder,
be in the Amsterdam Arena lighting it up.
I just wonder, will we be celebrating as much when we see who succeeds him? Let's see what happens there. Until
Mason
next time,
Mount
folks.
come in to take over, huh?
Good Lord, I don't know.
Morris would like that, wouldn't you, Morris, if Mason Mount came in?
John Joe Shelby's where it's at.
John Joe Shelby, yeah.
John Joe
The
Shelby
two of them,
is the
joint managers.
That's it, absolutely. Well, until next time, folks. Don't forget, subscribe, hit the bell notification on the upper tier, and of course, drop a like on the video. And I will talk to you again real soon. We'll be back tomorrow night, 9 o'clock, where we will have Jamie Phillips football chats on. We're going to be doing a preview for Money in the Bank with myself and Dazzler. Should be a bit of crack. So join us 9 o'clock tomorrow as well. Until next time, folks, an absolute pleasure. Cheers, lads.
Look.